Good morning, everyone. It is just about 5:30 in the morning on January 28th, 2020. January is already finished, and I totally forgot that it had even started. It's good. I'm glad that the year is moving forward as quickly as possible. Okay, we are finishing up the bass audio G12 sound test. This is the video regarding the treble. We've already done the bass and the mids, and now it's for the treble portion. Now, bass audio says that the G12 is a refinement, is an improvement over the G7. And one of the things I can tell you right now is that I think that is in fact true. The two headphones have a noticeable difference in sound signature. Some might find that the G7 is a little bit more harsh, a bit more steely sounding, a bit more analytical, whereas the G12 in comparison is more laid back, a bit smoother, and quite frankly has a bit more, noticeably more bass emphasis, clean bass emphasis than the G7, which doesn't really have a whole lot of bass emphasis. It's much more lean in that regard. So we have 3 songs queued. The 3 songs we're going to use today are Scherzo for X-Wings, Flight from the City, and New Light by Kazuki. So let's just get started. I'm on my test playlist, and we are ready to go with Scherzo for X-Wings. I have the headphones plugged into the JDS Labs Element. It's on high gain. Currently, I have the volume set around 8 o'clock, just a little bit shy of 8 o'clock. 6 o'clock on the dial is total mute, and so just turn it up to 8 o'clock. Okay, here we go. Scherzo for X-Wings. At the very beginning of the song, you hear the horns, but it's a little muted at 8 o'clock, so I'm going to increase to 9. And at 9 o'clock, I can't hear myself speak. It's very loud. The horns don't get harsh, they don't get ear-piercing, but there's a clear separation. You have this kind of a soundstage element where you have a group set on the right side, that you have another group set on the left side, and they are wonderfully separated. You cannot mix the two. This is great stereo imaging. A lot of times what happens is that when you wear headphones and you listen to Scherzo for X-Wings, all the music seems to be dead center and all seems to mix together. You're not really getting the width, you're not getting the placement. Sometimes you might hear an instrument on the left ear cup rather than the right ear cup. But this is the first time in a long time where I've heard a group set cleanly, absolutely separated from one ear cup to the other ear cup. So, like I said, I hear the brass and the horns on the right ear cup, and I hear some other instrument on the left ear cup, and they don't sound like they're dead center, like they're standing right in front of me. They're clearly placed inside the room. No piercingness at all. So there's a clear treble roll-off where these horns can get really, really sibilant very fast, but and by sibilant, I meant really harsh very fast. But the G12 does not present that at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back to a little bit further, so 53 seconds, and I'm going to increase the volume from 9 o'clock slowly until I can't take it anymore. And what I want to know is how much can I drive these headphones? Okay, so here we go. We are now at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. No harshness. Ooh. Okay, I gotta take this off. Oh, ho, 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 ho. Ooh, at 1 o'clock, I think my eardrums may have been busted open. Not because of the headphone doing anything improper, but because the volume is so loud. Not a single bit of harshness. No distortion, no ear piercingness other than the volume, but that's my fault. So as I put more power into these headphones, I drive them, more volume, the drivers don't distort. In fact, they stay very linear. The sound signature doesn't change from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. It doesn't change through that range. Instead, the only thing that happens is that the volume gets louder. And so that's a really interesting presentation because there are some headphones, the Sony Z7 Mark II, for example, are notorious for this, where you have to pump them with a lot of power to get the drivers to respond the way that they really sound good, I think. Tighter bass, more detail, faster resonance, transients. And there are other headphones that don't need that. They just kind of, they work really good. They don't need all that additional power. As long as you have enough power to actually start the drivers to work, you don't need any more. So there's a big difference. So for example, with the Z7, I had it plugged into the Audio GD1 amp, which is an incredibly powerful amplifier. And I had to turn the volume up to about 140 to really get the drivers to function. Anything less than about 120, 130, something like that. And the driver had a very different sound signature, more laid back. It was more muffled sound signature in the bass, less detail, less sound stage. And then you put in the additional power, and all of a sudden that changes. With the G12, that's not the case. In fact, as long as I provide enough power, and enough power, I would say probably at 9 o'clock on the element at high gain. From there on out, the more power I give it, the more volume I ask from the headphone, it does not change the sound signature of the headphone. So I took it all the way to the loudest I can possibly take it and not die. And it doesn't change the sound signature. So clearly there has been some excellent thought to keeping the drivers working linearly from the moment that you actually give sufficient power, enough power to drive the headphones. From there on out, it should stay the same. So that what that tells you is the takeaways. If you use this for portable, and you have an amplifier that has for example, there's a 2.6 watt portable amplifier that I'm reviewing, and if you use that, and it should be enough to drive the G12, then you won't need to worry about, boy, if I'm going to get a different sound signature from the portable amplifier than when I am sitting down at my desk listening to my Element or my 789. It should give you the exact same performance, barring any other DACs or headphone alterations that you have. Okay, so let's go to the next song, which is Flight from the City. Let's go to 8 o'clock, and here we go, Flight from the City. The piano seems to have this very clear sound signature, but it's not harsh, it's not tinny. There's a bit of reverberation as the hammer hits the string inside the piano. You hear this brum, brum, brum. It sounds very natural because if you're standing next to a piano and there's no other noise, just you're standing next to a piano, you can actually hear the same thing. Assuming that the piano player is playing softly like Johan Johansson's song here is. I hear the buzzing in the background, sounds like electrical buzzing. Clear separation between the piano and that effect. I'm going to increase the volume to 9 o'clock. And at 9 o'clock, I don't hear a whole lot change between 8 and 9 o'clock for this song. There's a little bit more resonance in the piano at 9 o'clock, just a slight bit. The cello sounds separate from the piano. The electrical buzz sounds separate from the other two elements. No harshness, no ear piercingness. I would say above average soundstage. So with this song, the reason I use this song is because sometimes you find a pair of headphones that totally distort the piano. The Neumann NDH20 is an excellent example because the NDH20 is pretty awful in most respects. With respect to, well, most respects. It's just pretty awful in most respects. But especially with this song, Flight from the City, every time I tested the headphone with this song, I said that it makes it sound like you're stuck in a shipping container with this grand piano, and it just sounds, it distorts, and it makes the whole song sound tinny and steely and harsh. And the G12 doesn't do that. I mean, most headphones don't do what the NDH20 did. Instead, what the G12 does is you get this kind of this clear sound of the piano, but it's not analytical sound. So what I mean is, there are headphones like the DT1990, which will accentuate some of the frequency, and it gets a little sparkly. And so you sit there, and if you increase the volume a little bit too much, it can become a bit too harsh with the cello and some of the piano keys. It just sounds a bit too sparkly, too much energy in the treble region. With the G12, there's a roll-off for sure, but that roll-off I don't think hurts the musicality of the song. In that, what I mean is, the piano doesn't sound muffled. The piano doesn't sound like it's losing some sort of detail. The piano doesn't sound like that it's has smaller soundstage. Instead, you're getting this very pleasant sound signature, a type of sound signature that has the reverberation that I spoke of, has the separation that I spoke of, is not harsh, and it sounds like you're probably about 15 feet away from the song, from the piano, in a, I would say, probably medium-sized room, larger than medium-sized room. And so with Flight from the City, I think the G12 is able to recreate this in a very intimate way. Not closed off intimate, not claustrophobic intimate, not very small soundstage intimate, but just smooth. As if you're sitting in a lounge, a hotel bar lounge somewhere. And it's just you and the pianist, and you're sitting there. That's the experience you're having. That's what I imagine it to be. It's not analytical like the 800 or the 1990. It's not muffled like with Bose headphones or even the AudioQuest Nighthawk. It's just clean, clear, separated, but it rolls off the treble just enough so that you can relax. All right, so let's go to New Light by Kazuki, and we're gonna leave the volume at 9 o'clock for this song, and here we go. So I hear the kids in the background. They sound distant, a little bit muffled. I hear the footsteps crunching on the dry grass. I hear the synth music in the background. I hear the piano. I hear the wind rustling through the grass. All those elements seem to be very well separated. You have the kids, the wind, the footsteps, the piano. There's also every once in a while there's this sharp sound like keys jiggling. If you have keys, holding keys in your hand and you're walking, you hear that click, click, click of the keys. I hear that every once in a while. In a few moments, we're going to get the guitar. Here we are. So here's the guitar. And the synth is being played louder at this point. So here are all the elements that I hear separated. The piano, the guitar, the synth, the wind. And at this point, the kid in the background is gone. The footsteps have stopped at this point. Sometimes the synth music with this song gets distorted. The Beyerdynamic headphones, the DT headphones, have an incredibly hard time reproducing this frequency right here, starting around 1 minute and 25 seconds, where that synth just comes up. And the DT headphones, they just distort, and it sounds like it's as if there's a fan blowing in front of you, and you walk up to the fan, and you start talking into it as the fan is blowing air into your face. You've done that as a kid, and you know how it sounds. That's the way that the DT series make this portion of the song sound. The G12 does not. There's no distortion, no harshness, no peakiness. I'm going to increase the volume to 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock is incredibly loud for this song. I'm going to bring it back down to 9. Okay. So, very good separation of all the elements. Not the cleanest I've ever heard, clearly. I've heard much more clarity with the focal clear, for example. But I do hear a lot of those little elements in the song, especially for the first minute and a half before you get the synth rising to crescendo level. And when the synth rises to crescendo, it muffles, drowns out the vast majority of all the other elements. But I think that the other elements have stopped by that point in the song. The kids have stopped, the walking has stopped, the wind has stopped. By the time you get to 1 minute and 30 seconds, I think those elements are just no longer present. And the synth just takes over from everything else. So now what we're going to do is we're going to test for the number of footsteps that I can count in New Light. This is the same test I perform with every headphone. The gold standard is the focal clear. They've provided 16 footsteps within first 45 seconds. Every other other headphone gets 1 minute, the full 60 seconds. Because look, we're talking about two very different types of headphones. The focal clear are just so superb that it's hard to compare those with any other mediocre type of headphone. I mean, mediocre in comparison. So that's why every other headphone gets 1 minute. So far, what we've found is that the closest one in my initial testing was the G12, the one I have here. But we're going to do the official test right now and find out exactly how many I hear. I'm going to leave the volume at 9 o'clock, and here we go with the footsteps. I'm just going to count the number of footsteps I hear. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, so 13 in the first minute. My initial impression video, I think I said 12, so within the margin of error. 12 to 13. I'm just going to say 12, just for the sake of being safe. And that's the best I've heard so far. 12 to 13 is the best I've heard so far. The closest other headphone that I think came was at 11 footsteps, which was the Sundara. I think that's the closest that I've compared so far, other than the G12. So the G12 clearly does well. I mean, it's no focal clear. It's never going to be a focal clear. But it does provide separation, clarity, and sufficient detail, I think, for the likes of the Sundara and the LCD1, which did abysmally. The LCD1 provided, I think, 7 or 8 footsteps, or the HD 660, 660 or 650, I don't remember now, 7 to 8 footsteps, no different from the LCD1. So clearly, the G12 has more detail retrieval for this particular test than the other headphones we've tested, any of the other headphones we've tested. Maybe it's within the margin of error of the Hi-Fi Man Sundara. That's a possibility. But it's certainly no worse than the Sundara, and it appears that it might be actually better in this respect than the Sundara. Okay, so let's talk about conclusions. I am fairly happy with the G12. At $350, which is the MSRP, would I recommend this headphone? You know, probably. Just, I'm not comparing it to any other headphone at this point. I'm just saying, if you have no other headphone, or if you have some generic headphone that I don't know anything about, would I recommend the G12 at $350? Yeah, probably. But the thing is, it's hard for me to say yes or no to that number because I have a lot of really good headphones. And the way I look at it is, okay, so if you spend another $100, could you get something better? If you spend another $200, could you get something better? And the answer is typically, yeah, probably. You can probably find something better for $550 instead of $350, right? That's certainly possible. And I may actually know of a headphone when we do the actual comparisons that at $550 beats the G12. But if we're just talking about $350, what other headphones are available at $350? I mean, you have the 6XX, you have the 58X, you have Beats, you have Bose. What other headphone is for $350? I think you can get the 1070 for $50 more, $399. But we're talking about apples and oranges at that point, planar magnetic versus dynamic, giant headphone versus not giant headphone. And I think that for $350, that's MSRP, the G12 does things really well. Whether or not you can justify $350 for this particular headphone is totally up to you. Now, the real price, the price I paid and the price I think is still available on Amazon is $150. For $150, yeah, this should definitely be a headphone that is on the top of your list for consideration. Because I can't think of any $150 headphone that has this type of separation, that has this type of clarity, without the harshness, without distortion, that has open back wideness, and it has excellent bass response of a closed back. I mean, putting all those things together, if you put in all those factors, I cannot think of a $150 headphone that ticks off each and every one of those requirements. Not a single one at $150. If you can't, tell me, but I can't. And looking at it from that perspective, the price that it's actually available right now, hopefully, $150, yes. I think that this is definitely worth consideration. Whether this is your headphone, the type of headphone you are actually going to like in the future, whether you really like the sound signature after you put it on and connect it to your system, I can't say. But using an amplifier DAC that is readily available, that is mass-produced, that it is frankly affordable for the most part, right? I mean, it's not cheap. It's about $350, something like that, $400. It's not cheap, but it is attainable when you take a look at stacking, right? If you take a look at something like the 789 plus a DAC, or you look at the Monolith THX desktop, which is more money. So yes, you can get it connected to something as attainable as the JDS Element and get this type of sound signature, the type that I've described. And if that's the type of sound signature that you think you might be interested with, then for $150, I can't really think of anything else. You might be able to find something that comes, close. Maybe the Monoprice HR5, maybe. But the HR5 have their own significant issues. Build quality is definitely, toss of the coin. The size, the fact that the Monoprice headphone is probably not as accurate or as musical, meaning it doesn't have that roll off that the G12 does. It has a little bit more sparkle in it. All those other factors. Maybe the cheaper Monoprice is a better option for you, but I don't know, because I don't know what your particular taste is. What I can say is that the G12 has performed very well for a $150 pair of headphones. And the sound test shows that the G12 has really excellent, deep, tight bass response, especially for an open back, and frankly, better than some closed back headphones. It's got excellent separation of mids. This is probably a bit mid-forward sound signature. Probably another step or two ahead of all the other elements in a mix. There's some muffled nature to multiple vocalists, like in Haim, when there's the drum, the piano, and the guitar, and all that stuff playing. You can't really hear the separation of vocalists with all the elements are playing, but that's about average, meaning a lot of headphones do that. And now for the treble response, there's a roll-off. And that roll-off is fairly gentle, but it's just enough so that you can sit there and listen to a song without losing significant detail, if any, and without harshness or treble pierciness, and without distortion with songs like New Light or Flight from the City. I hope that this has been of some help. If you've enjoyed this content, if you like these types of reviews, please consider donating a couple of bucks to me on Patreon. If you are not a subscriber, hey, think about subscribing. If you have any questions or concerns, leave them in the comment section below. And starting maybe tomorrow, maybe Wednesday, tomorrow's Wednesday, maybe Thursday, we are going back to the LCD-1, and we are comparing the LCD-1 to the cheapest pair of headphones I could find that actually does in fact compete with the LCD-1 for mixing and mastering. So we'll come back to that on Thursday, very likely. As for the G12, hey, hopefully this has been helpful. And if you have any questions about it, let me know. Everybody, I hope you take care on this Tuesday and you have a fantastic end to your January 2020.